everyone, so in this video I'm going to be talking about the March Gala Reward Competition information and sharing my suggestions and thoughts that I have right now. So Townstar actually shared all the information for the next competition so early, like I don't think they've ever shared it this early. And they also plan to have the meta live in-game on Monday, February 27, 2023. Which is amazing because it gives us a whole week to actually play and practice this meta for the next competition. I really hope they start doing this more often moving forward. But getting into the actual competition information, the next competition starts on March 7, 2023. The prize structure will be Gala to the top 1,000 players in the leaderboard. The better your placement is, the more Gala you will receive. And the meta is Fancy Cakes. So Fancy Cakes will sell for a standard amount of cash at 274,500 cash and will give a boosted amount of stars at 50,000 stars per Fancy Cake. Moving on to the meta changes, Red Steel is of course going back to the standard amount of stars and will have different ingredients required. But you won't be crafting Red Steel for this competition. You'll definitely want to be crafting Fancy Cakes in order to stay competitive. And moving on to the other ingredient meta changes, before I get into those, just know that a Fancy Cake has a crafting cost of 1 cake, 3 chocolate bars, and 2 strawberries. The strawberries aren't much of an issue at all. The chocolate bars really aren't that much of an issue either. It's the cakes that take the most effort, in my opinion. So most of these ingredients have been reduced for the cakes. The chocolate bars ingredients have also been slightly reduced. So cakes will now require 1 batter, 2 sugar, and 3 energy. So instead of 6 sugar, it's 2 sugar. That's a huge cut to sugar. Batter will require 2 flour, 1 butter, and 3 eggs. So instead of 2 butter, it is 1 butter. So that's completely cut in half. As well as butter now only requiring 1 salt, 2 milk, and 1 sugar. So instead of 2 salt, it's been cut down in half to 1 salt. So there's way less salt usage there. And chocolate bar requires 1 sugar, 1 milk, and 3 cocoa. So instead of 2 sugar and 2 milk, it's been cut down in half to 1 sugar and 1 milk. So these meta changes are of course for the meta. They are not core changes. They will go back to normal after this meta. But for this meta, these changes make it so that you will probably be using less windmills and more of other buildings like bakeries and cakeries. So do keep that in mind when designing the build. Moving on to the build cost changes. The research center actually stays the same as it is now in the Red Steel competition, with it costing 20 oak wood, 20 lumber, 500,000 cash, and 5 million stars in order to build. The logger house, farm tractor, and ATV have the same crafting costs for this next meta. That's 5 wood, 5 lumber, 75,000 cash, and 500,000 stars. This is actually less of a star cost than they currently have in the Red Steel competition, which is 1 million stars to build a logger or a tractor. But in this Fancy Cake competition coming up, they've also included ATV. They have the stars, which is good. I believe 500,000 stars is pretty balanced, but it really depends on what people get in terms of production rate for Fancy Cakes. Overall, I think it would be a good idea to actually build loggers, farmers, farm tractors, I should say, and ATVs for the next Fancy Cake competition, considering they cost less stars. I know some people aren't a big fan of the star cost idea, but it really makes you consider if it's worth building them or not. It really may be too early to say. My initial thoughts are that they probably will be worth it at this star cost price, but we really need to see what the actual production rate or average production rate for Fancy Cakes is before I can absolutely say that they're worth it and at what point they would not be worth it. Moving on to the research center craft changes. So they have changed how the research works. It will now be a windmill, miller speed buff, a farm tractor speed buff, the cow speed buff, and of course you still have your global speed buff, but that's actually been buffed even further. So I'll talk about the miller speed buff first. That one will make the movement speed of the millers faster by 25%. That costs 50 million cash and 30 chocolate covered strawberries. The chocolate covered strawberries probably won't be much of an issue. You have chocolate bars and strawberries already in your build. I believe you only need to build a candy shop in order to actually craft the chocolate covered strawberries, so it shouldn't be too much work. And of course you want to have faster miller movement speed so that the deposit the items to the storehouses faster for your cake production. Next is the farm tractor speed, a 25% movement speed increase in tractor speed. Just to be clear, because for some reason a lot of people get this confused, this is only for tractors, not for farmer houses. This buff will not boost the farmer house movement speed, just the tractor movement speed. I hope I made that clear. 50 million cash in order to build and 30 honeycombs. That would mean you will have to place down the whole setup for honeycombs. That's a pottery shop, clay fields, beehives, beekeepers, and nectar fields just to get 30 honeycombs. So there is some work into it. It's not too bad, but yeah, you'll need to place a lot of buildings you normally wouldn't in this meta. And of course, you would like to have faster tractors. It's going to save space. You're going to have a lot of tractors in this build gathering crops. And the next one is cow speed, a 25% increase in movement speed to cows. That costs 50 million cash and 15 dough. You can already craft dough in the bakeries, and you should have bakeries in this fancy cake build. The dough requires flour, and I can't remember the other ingredients on top of my head. I believe it's also eggs and butter. But dough should not be too hard to craft. I mean, you'll essentially already be crafting all the ingredients for it. So yeah, it should not be too hard to get this one. But the global speed bonus, so they made this one better. They buffed the best buff in the game. It's a 75% increase in movement speed for windmills, the millers and the windmills, the farm tractors, and the cow speed. But they also made it so that it's a 50% movement speed increase to all other units in the game. So normally it was 25%, but now they made it so that it's 50%. They have doubled that. They have made this buff insanely good, more than what it was already. So this one costs 250 million cash. Of course, it's a lot of cash, and you're not going to get this one on day one. It's also going to cost 100 honey. That is going to take some work, just like those honeycombs. 100 honey will take some time. You will have to put buildings you normally wouldn't for that. And it's going to take 25 Chardonnay wine. Now that will take a lot of effort. Once again, you're going to have to put a lot of buildings that you normally wouldn't for this meta just to make the 25 Chardonnay wine. But if you manage to get all those items and eventually build up the cash to get this research is really going to help you in your production rates, and it's really going to help you be competitive. So overall, if you're willing to put in all the effort in this competition, I do recommend doing the researches. Definitely. The building upgrades, I can't say definitely yet. Like I said, it depends on the production rate we see on average for fancy cakes. My initial thought is yes, it will probably make sense to get these upgraded buildings. And that's all the information they shared. At the top of my head, what I can remember is that eggs will still remain cash boosted, so they'll still continue to give 3,300 cash for each egg. And obviously you will be crafting eggs in the majority of the fancy cake competition, since they are required for batter. Now, looking at these ingredients, since they do cost less ingredients but they still give the same amount of cash, you may consider getting to cakes. Maybe you may sell a batch of cakes if you really need the money. perhaps you could sell a batch of batter or butter. So there are considerations that you can make in order to sell something better than eggs and get more cash, because these ingredients cost less than they normally would. I cannot guarantee that would be the way to go, but that's from my initial thoughts. That may be something you want to consider selling for more cash than eggs, until of course you get to fancy cakes. Once you get to fancy cakes, you're selling that for all the cash and all the stars you're going to need to be competitive in that competition. So I'm going to talk about biomes a bit. The best biome would probably be a desert. The oil seep's going to help you out, but I really think you could still do this competitively in the plains or a forest. It's in the forest, it's going to be annoying to clear all those trees out, but the ponds help you out with your initial egg rush with the chicken coops. But if I had to pick, I still have my preference of the desert. As for biomes on the edge biomes I would recommend are ocean and rivers. You're gonna probably want one ocean to help you have green timers for the salt fields, since you will need to be producing brine to make salt. You actually won't need that much salt as you would need in a usual cake or fancy cake build, since they've reduced the ingredients for this meta. So it is very friendly for people who don't manage to get ocean, but I would still of course recommend one ocean edge to have those green timers. It's going to save you a lot of space. If you don't want an ocean and you somehow manage to get multiple rivers, you could get 3 rivers without an ocean and it could pay off. You're going to save a lot of space on not needing that many ponds, but you are going to have to put multiple salt fields down. Each one needs 3 passive water and they'll all have a red timer, so that is going to take up some space right there. The most ideal setup for biomes I would recommend is having a desert, or any biome, but preferably a desert, with one ocean edge and one river edge adjacent to it. So one ocean, one river right next to each other in a corner. That would be the ideal biome setup that I would aim for. And really that's all the information I have. So hopefully my sharing my thoughts and information helped you out here. I don't have a build for this ready yet. Obviously it's still too early. I am going to work on it as soon as I have a chance. And yeah, that's all the information I have. If you like this video, consider leaving a like, leave comments if you have any feedback or questions about the next meta, and consider subscribing so you don't miss out on my future content, such as the build showcases I show for the next competition. I really appreciate your support and thank you for watching.